Ah!
Heyo, it's Dave here at Blue Bears Games, and this week is another edition of Blues Budget Brews. As a reminder, the Budget Brew series is all about Commander. This is a Budget Commander deck, and it is also for sale. I will give you all those details at the end of the video, but for now, let's actually get into what this deck is. So, this week we are doing Malcolm and Breeches, or better known as Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator and Breeches Brazen Plunderer. They are partner commanders, so you can have both in the command zone. The only difference between this deck and any other deck is the fact that it has to be 98 in the actual deck, and then the two commanders equal your 100. So other than that, it's commander, so it's partner commanders, so you can have both out in play. You can cast them at different times. So it's not really that big of a difference. It's almost like the Tormod deck I did, like a couple months ago. That one didn't really focus heavily on the partner aspect. This one does. So this deck is actually a quasi pirate tribal steal your opponent's spells deck. Okay, so let me read Malcolm to you real quick. Malcolm is a 2/2 flyer for 3. Right off the bat, that's pretty good anyway. And then whenever one or more pirates you control deal damage to your opponents, doesn't have to be combat damage, you create a treasure token for each opponent dealt damage. And of course it has partner. The other part of it is Breeches. So you get the treasure tokens with Malcolm so you can cast extra things. And then Breeches is a 4 to cast 3/3 with Menace that says whenever one or more pirates you control deal damage to your opponents, and again, not combat damage, exile the top card of each of those opponents' libraries, and you may play those cards this turn, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast them. So that means that no matter what you have out, as long as you have the converted mana cost, or the what do they have it out as, mana value of the card, you can cast it because it doesn't matter what the colors are. Okay? So you can kind of see where that's going. So whenever your pirates deal damage, if they're both out, you get a treasure token to help you cast things, and then you get to exile the top card of an opponent who was dealt damage's library, and then you may cast that card. Now, I believe it's for that turn. So yeah, for that turn, you may cast it. So keep that in mind as well when you're playing a deck like this. You have to be able to cast it as far as if it's exiled over and it's a sorcery and it's not your turn, you cannot play it unless they've specified in his rulings, which I will go through the rulings and read them, and if there is a change, I'll let you know. But you have to follow the timing rules. So if it's an instant on somebody else's turn, you can cast it. I believe this is cast, so you can't play their lands. Exile the top card of each opponent's library, and you may play. You can play. So if it's your turn, you didn't play a land for the turn, and you exile over a land, it says play. So you may also play a land of your opponent's, like that. If your opponent turned one over or exiled one, you may play that as well. So just keep all that in mind. Let's get into the deck. I'll go over the little nuances of it, and then I'll go into some upgrades for it. So I always start, when I do one of these, the lands as usual. This is a pretty basic set of lands just because it's only 2 colors. So I have as many of the dual lands that are on the budget side in here as possible. So Temple of Epiphany, it at least lets you scry 1. Prismary Campus lets you scry repeatedly. This is a really good addition. I love Strixhaven added this to the game. Swiftwater Cliffs gives you a land when it a life when it enters. Izzet Guildgate, Highland Lake, Remote Isle. I think I put in here as many cyclers, so I'll go through them too. You can cycle away if you draw it late. Lonely Sandbar and Desert of the Mindful. They all cycle away if you get them late game, or you can just play them early game if you need the mana. Same thing with Smolder and Cradle. It's the red version. Forgotten Cave, and of course Desert of the Fervent. Again, you cycle them away late game if you don't need the land because you'd rather have other spells. That's the only purpose of those. Terramorphic Expanse, again, mana fixing, it helps you thin out your deck. Access Tunnel, because you want to be dealing damage in a deck like this. Is basically a pirate tribal, but it has a little bit of extra oomph just because it has the other abilities from your 2 commanders. So being able to hit things without worry, specifically even if it's just your commander, for commander damage, it's nice to be able to go unblocked. And then the rest are mountains and islands. And then again, as I always let you all know, when I go rifle through stuff where I don't give the amount because, commander's usually 1, but basic lands are not, I'll have a link to the deck list, the full deck list, in the description, just so you can see how many of each there are. Now, we're going to go into the quasi-ramp, and I say that because blue and red do not do ramp at all. So, you kind of have to rely on mana rocks, and you kind of have to rely on artifacts that go and get lands, and they have to fit into the budget. So this is a Izzet Cluestone. This is the non-English version. I had one I thought was pretty cool, so I threw it in there. It taps to add a blue or a red. Then you can pay a blue and a red, tap it and sacrifice it, and you can draw a card. So later on, if you don't need it anymore, you can go ahead and draw a card. The key rune, it turns into a 2/1 blue and red elemental artifact. It's not really that important. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card, and if you do, discard a card. So it's to help you cycle through your deck if you use it for that. But otherwise, it's just a dual mana rock. Izzet Locket, same thing as the Cluestone. It taps to add blue or red, and then you can sacrifice it to draw 2 cards later if you don't need it anymore. Traveler's Amulet lets you go and get a basic land, reveal it, and put it into your hand. So again, it helps mana fix. Same thing with Renegade Map. So you sack it, and then you go search for a basic land card and put it into your hand. And that's about the best you can do. I mean, there are some other ways to do it, and I'll have that in the upgrade section. Just remember, this is a budget deck, and I don't want it to go above $40, so that's what we get. The meat of the deck is the creatures, because this is the Pirate Tribal deck. So I'll go over all that real quick. We start off with the first time I think I've ever put a vehicle into one of these decks. It's Fell Flagship, and the only reason why it's in there is because technically, while it can be a creature because it's a vehicle, it's in here for the Anthem-style effect that it gives other pirates you control +1/+0. You can use it to attack with, and then it says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card, so there's a bonus to that. It's kind of a black ability. I don't know why it would be on pirates. I mean, there are some black pirates, but I mean, this could have been more worked out to be for all the colors that have pirates, blue and red included. This is just pure black ability, but it's nice to have it in here because of the Anthem effect. Kite Sail Corsair, just because it's a 2/1 that can be flying, and it's a pirate. Stormfleet Aerialist, also flying, so it has some evasion in this deck as well, so you can get that damage through, so you can use your commander's abilities. It also enters the battlefield with +1/+1 counter if you attacked with the creature this turn. So if you cast it on your second main phase, it'll be a 2/3. Departed Deckhand, more of evasion. When it becomes target of a spell or just a spell actually, you sacrifice it, but it can't be blocked except by spirits. And then you can also make another target creature you control not able to be blocked except by spirits for the turn. So more evasion. Sailor of Means, just when it comes into play, it gives you a treasure token. Trove Tracker has the Encore ability, and I'll let you read that while I go over this. When it dies, you draw a card. It's a 3 to cast 2/2. And then, of course, the Encore ability, you can create multiple of them if it's in your graveyard by exiling it. You can read that as you go. Stormfleet Spy, again, another 3 to cast 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, if you attack with a creature, you draw a card, so some card draw. Azure Fleet Admiral, it's the 4 to cast 3/3, and then when it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. And if you don't understand the Monarch rules, let me know. I'll explain them to you. But in essence, what it means is that if you're the Monarch, you draw a card at the beginning of your end step, and then there are other things that you get as a benefit for it. The other ability that inherently comes with being the Monarch is if somebody deals combat damage to you, they become the Monarch. And then it says it can't be blocked by creatures the Monarch controls, so if somebody else becomes the Monarch, it can't be blocked by their creatures. Rashadan Footpad. So this is a neat one. So this was not originally a pirate. I think it was something else, but it makes sense to be a pirate. When it originally came out, I believe maybe it was a pirate. I don't remember. It was so long ago for Mercadian Masks, but it's a pirate that says when it comes into play, each opponent sacrifices a permanent Unless they pay 2. There are a bunch of these. I think there's 4 total of these. The problem is I don't own them. The only reason why I have this one is because it was in either a list pack or a set booster pack as a list card, or it was in mystery boosters. I don't remember. But if you can get a couple of the other ones, there's I think a 2 to cast one and a 3 to cast one, and I believe there's a rare one that's 4 as well. They're nice to be able to recur if you can do that, but if not, you can still make your opponent sacrifice things just by having these guys in there and casting them. You don't even have to cast them, it's just when they come into play. So if you're able to blink these, you can really do some damage. Merchant Raiders, 4 to cast 2/4, and then whenever it or another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, you can tap up to 1 target creature, and that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step as long as you control him. So it's a nice way to control the board on the creature side. It helps so you can tap down opponent's creatures, and again, more evasion. Siren Reaver, just a 4 to cast 3/2 flyer, and then it costs 1 less if you attacked with a creature this turn. The Deadeye Quartermaster, it's a 4 to cast 2/2, and then when it enters the battlefield, search your library for an equipment card or vehicle card, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle your library. Again, there's 1 vehicle, the Fell Flagship. There are a couple other equipments that I have in here. I'll go over them later, and there's a reason for them, so that's actually more along the lines of a tutor for you than anything else. Dreamcaller Siren, it's a 4 to cast 3/3 flyer, and it also has flash, so you can cast it at any time you can cast an instant. It can only block creatures with flying, which is a downfall for the most part, but it's still a 4 to cast 3/3 flyer. And when it enters the battlefield, if you control another pirate, you can tap up to 2 target non-land permanents. So more tapping down, more control of the board, more evasion. Here's an interesting one. Pirate Ship. So this is a rare from way back in the day. I actually used to play a Timmy deck, or that's what we called it back then. I don't know what everybody calls them now. I'm sure it's still Timmy. But what that means is you have creatures that tap to do a damage to something. 1 damage specifically, and there's a lot of blue creatures that do it. Zoran Spellcaster, Prodigal Sorcerer, which is Timmy. This has been changed to be a pirate. I mean, it makes sense. It's a pirate ship, literally. So it's now a pirate. This taps to deal damage to target creature or player. It's been changed to deal damage to anything. And what that means is when you have Malcolm out, I'm sorry, not Malcolm, sorry, Breeches out, when you do a damage to something, and it's done at instant speed, so you can do it anytime you want, it triggers your 2 commanders, so you can get a treasure token out of it, and you can also exile the top card of the library and maybe play it depending on what it is. So keep that in mind. There's a small sub-theme in here with that going, so just remember that. Rigging Runner, 1 to cast 1/1 first striker, and then it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter if you attack with the creature this turn. So notice the small theme of raid in here because it's pirates. Pirates have a small sub-theme of raid. That's why I have some evasion in here. Daring Buccaneer, 1 to cast 2/2, and then you have to pay an additional 2 or reveal a pirate from your hand to cast it. So it's just in there because it's a cheap one. It's a cheap 2/2. Impulsive Pilfer, it's a 1 to cast 1/1. When it dies, create a treasure token, and then it has Encore. So you create as many as you have an opponent when it's in your graveyard. So you exile it, create a token for each opponent, and then it is exiled at the beginning of your end step. So when it dies, actually, is it sacrifice it at the beginning of this? Sacrifice them. Okay, not exile them. Big difference. You sacrifice them so they go to the grave. The tokens do, and then you create treasure tokens. So that's what they're there for. Fanatical Firebrand. It's 1 to cast 1/1 that has haste, and then you can sacrifice to deal damage to any target. There's that ping again, so you can get a Breeches and an Ori Malcolm trigger. Reckless Fireweaver, 2 to cast 1/3. So whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So if you had a way to make this a pirate, it would actually trigger your 2 commanders. It's not a pirate, so it doesn't trigger them. This is just in there because it deals extra damage to each opponent. The Trailblazer, it's a Goblin Trailblazer. It's a pirate. That's a 2/1 menace. That's basic and simple. Stormfleet Swashbuckler, it's a 2/2 that gives you Ascend. So if you have 10 or more permanents in play, you gain the City's Blessing, and you have it for the rest of the game. And then when you have the City's Blessing, this creature gains double strike. Coastline Marauders, another Encore creature. It's a 3 to cast, 0/3 Trampler. When it attacks, it gets +1/+0 for until end of turn for each land the defending player controls, so it can get pretty big against green decks because they usually like to play a lot of land. And then the Encore is again, so you exile it from your graveyard if it's in your graveyard, and then you create a token for each opponent you have, and then they have haste, and then you sacrifice them at the end of the turn. So it depends, each opponent may have a different set of amount of lands, but you still get to attack them with something that doesn't really matter if it dies because it's going to die anyway. This is where the interesting thing comes in. If you can get Lightning Rig Crew out as soon as possible with any of your commanders out, this is where this guy's really good. So he is a pirate. He taps to do a damage to each opponent, so you get the triggers for your commander for every opponent you have, and then whenever you cast its pirate spell, you untap it. You can get multiple triggers in a turn just for him being out and for casting your pirates. He is the combo piece that you're looking for. So if you want to start to really do some major damage, Lightning Rig Crew is your go-to guy. If you can find a way to get him in your hand as quick as possible, do it. Swaggering Corsair, another 3 to cast 2/2 with Raid, and then he enters with a +1/+1 counter if you attack with the creature this turn. Captivating Crew, 4 to cast 4/3, and then for every 4 you put into it, and with the colon, that means that you can do it as much as you have mana. And remember, you're making treasure tokens, so go from there. Gain control of target creature and opponent controls until end of turn. Untap it, it gains haste, and then you can only activate that anytime you cast a sorcery. Just keep that in mind because you cannot cast on opponent's turns. Fathom Fleet Swordjack, another Encore creature. When it attacks, it deals damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking equal to the number of artifacts you control. So remember, treasure tokens are artifacts. So with that in mind, it does trigger more than once in a combat. If it gets through, it deals damage to the player. If you're attacking the player, it triggers your commanders. And then it deals combat damage. It can trigger them again if it got through. So, Brazen Freebooter. When it enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. Plain and simple. The Buccaneers. They're a 4 to cast 2/2 with haste. And then when it enters the battlefield, you explore. And explore is pretty simple. You look at the top card of your library, and you can put it in your hand if it's a land, or you can put a +1/+1 counter on it if it's not. And then you may put the card back on top of your library or into your graveyard. Crimson Fleet Commodore. It's a 4 to cast 5/2. It has trample, so again, more combat damage that can get through for your triggers. And when it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. So again, I went over the quick rules real quick earlier. You can draw a card at the beginning of your end step. That's always great. Emberwild Captain. It's a 4 to cast 4/2, and it enters the battlefield. You also become the Monarch. When an opponent attacks you while you are the Monarch, Emberwild Captain deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in their hand. So if somebody's attacking and you have one of your commanders out, with Breeches, you get to turn the top card. You exile the top card of their library, and you may cast that card if you have the ability to play it. And then you've got Malcolm, who will give you a treasure token. So, Coercive Recruiter, 5 to cast 4/3, and then when it or another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, you gain control of target creature until end of turn. You untap that creature until end of turn. It gains haste and becomes a pirate. So, pretty simple. You get the steal creature. If you had a way to sacrifice them, which, there are ways, I just didn't add them into this deck right now, you'd be able to just take them and sacrifice them on your opponents and create more chaos on the board. And last but not least, Captain Vargas Wrath. He was the other choice for commander, and he still could be if you want to change it out to make him the commander. You can for this deck. He is a 2 to cast 1/1, and whenever Captain Vargas Wrath attacks pirates you control, get +1/+1 on the turn for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone in this game. So with him out, you have to remember that every time you've cast a commander, not just your, most decks have one commander, so you count that. You count each time you've cast both. So if you've cast both twice, that's 4. Just remember that. So that's the last creature that we have here. Next, we're going to go into some utility stuff. Utility, as far as card draw in red and blue, you should have a lot of options there, and then the upgrade options are even better because blue's card draw is the best in the game. For this deck, I went with Red's strong point of looting. Specifically, like, what looting means is you're drawing cards and discarding the same amount of cards, okay? So that's where Faithless Looting, that's where it got its name. Looting is from cards like this, or Merfolk Looter. That's how that started. So with Faithless Looting, it has flashback, so you can cast it again later. This one lets you draw 2 cards, then you discard 2 cards. I had that in the theme here because a deck like this wants to roll through its options, cast the creatures so that it can get to specific parts of the certain creatures, specifically the guy that taps and deal damage to each opponent. Get it on the board as fast as possible, and then doesn't really matter what it's discarding. Most likely it's going to be lands because most of the things in here cost 4 or less. Tormenting Voice is another option. You discard a card and draw 2 cards. Throw a Possibility is an instant version of that. Wild Guess, you discard a card and draw 2 cards for 2 red instead of for a red and white, or red and 1 of any. Seize the Spoils is a 3 cast version of this. You discard a card and then draw 2, but then you can create a treasure token. Obviously that fits the theme here. Honor the God Pharaoh, you can do the same thing, but now you get to amass, which is you put a 0/0 black zombie army token into play and then put a +1/+1 counter on it. Pirate's Pillage, obviously that had to come in here. So you discard a card, draw 2 cards, and then create 2 treasure tokens. Obviously that fits very well. Anticipate, you look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 of them in your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So not really card draw per se, but it helps you filter out the top of your deck. Shimmer of Possibility, also look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Divination just lets you draw 2 cards. And Hieroglyphic Elimination lets you draw 2 cards, or you can cycle it away for 1 at instant speed for 4. So obviously there are better options as far as the card draw. However, on a budget, you have to make some choices. Those are the best options I had available. So on top of utility, you have defense. What is Red best at? Well, Red's best at killing artifacts. Blue doesn't really destroy anything. It really just returns things. But as far as the rest goes, you can destroy a lot of artifacts. So Shenanigans destroys an artifact. You can dredge it and bring it back in case you have other artifacts you want to destroy. Smash to Smithereens. It destroys an artifact and it deals 3 damage to that artifact's controller. Cleansing Wildfire. It's in here, so in Commander, there are a lot of lands that you're going to face that are really just a pain in the ass. You know, Urborg, the new green one, Yavimaya, not Yavimaya, Yavimaya. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Lots of things that are just a pain in the butt. Cleansing Wildfire lets you get rid of those. Same thing with Geomancer's Gambit. Now, the good thing about it is they let you draw a card so you can replace it as well. Same thing with the Gambit. It lets you draw a card. So you get rid of a pain in the ass land and you have to go get a basic land. Good swap in my book. Fiery Cannonade deals 2 damage to each non-pirate creature. I mean, in a pirate deck, what more could you ask for? Essence Scatter lets you counter a creature spell. Obviously, that's just defensively. You can counter somebody's commander for the most part. Or if somebody has a combo piece that's in creature, obviously you want to counter it. Lookout's Dispersal. It costs 1 less to cast if you control a pirate. Obviously, you're going to. And you can counter a spell unless the controller pays 4. So, not a lot of defense. This deck is not really defense heavy. You can change it up to be, but I wanted it to... The basic theme for here is I wanted to be able to use the commanders to full effect. So, and then the last part is the utility and the combo pieces, or not really combo, but stuff that go well together in this deck. So there's a theme here I was going with earlier where you can deal damage anytime you want, so you can use your commander's abilities, which is creating treasure tokens, exiling the top card of your opponent's libraries, and being able to cast their stuff. So this is where that section is going to come in. Start with a lightning volley. So here, it's an instant that lets you give all your creatures the ability to ping or be like a pirate ship. So they all have tapped. This creature deals 1 damage to, and it now says any target. So if you hit your opponents, you'll be able to create treasure tokens and exile the top card of their library and be able to cast their spells. That's where the theft comes in. That's how pirates work. That's their theft. Teleportal is nice evasion. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 and is unblockable. You can overload it for 5, and then all of your creatures get +1/+0 and are unblockable. Arcane Teachings is a enchantment that goes onto a creature, gives it +2/+2, and it gives it the ability of a pirate ship, which is to tap it and deal 1 damage to any target. So again, more of the Breeches Malcolm shenanigans by being able to directly deal damage to your opponents. Same thing with the Quicksilver Dagger. The enchanted creature gains a ping or deal 1 damage to target player, and then you draw a card. So the good thing is you can draw a card. Now, with this one, if you really wanted to be a little cheeky with it, I know that the ability of the Rigger is that it deals 1 damage to each opponent, but if you attach this to him, you also have the ability to, when it has the ability to untap because you cast Pirates, draw a lot of cards with it too. Sorcerer's Wand and equipment that gives the creature this creature deals 1 damage to a creature or player, or I'm sorry, to target player or planeswalker, and if that creature is a wizard, it deals 2 damage instead. That would mean if the creature it's attached to is a wizard, and I believe there were some. I don't remember. But either way, it helps your creatures ping players for your triggers. Same thing with Wolf Hunter's Quiver. This creature now deals 1 damage to a creature or player, and then it deals 3 damage to a werewolf. If you can do that as well. But I mean, you're really trying to get pings in or little 1 damage jabs in on your opponents for triggers for your 2 commanders. Viridian Longbow, it gives the creature the inherent ability to deal damage to a creature or player, and it equips for 3. It's 1 to cast, it's cheap too. And then the last but not least, Heavy Aeroblast, same thing as the rest. The equipped creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step, but it gives the creature the ability to deal 2 damage to target creature or player. So you can swap it back and forth between creatures, so that if one's untapped during your untap step, it doesn't get affected by it. Blah 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 blah. Once this goes to a different creature, it kills an untap during its controller's next untap step goes away. So keep that in mind. And that is the basic idea of the deck. Deal direct damage with little pingers that get put on your pirates. Use your pirates to deal the damage with combat damage with evasion, so that you can use your 2 commanders to steal cards from your opponent off the top of their library or create treasure tokens. And there are other things you can do, but we'll go into that in a second. Now for the upgrade section. It's a pretty simple list, so let me go ahead and zoom in on them, so if you need to read them, you can. I doubt it. You can always look them up on the Gatherer. Alright, so upgrades. For lands, it's pretty basic. So obviously, the first thing you want to do is fix your mana base. You're going to start off with a Volcanic Island, which is the OG dual land, which is expensive, so you probably won't do that. But it's a good way to fix. You can also go with the Shock Land, which is Steam Vents. Or the Fetch Land, you can go get a Scalding Tarn. From what I understand, they're actually flowing like water right now because of Modern Horizons 2. You can do a Sulphur Falls, which is the check land, a Shivan Reef, which is the pain land, or a Cascade Bluffs, which is a filter land. The River Glide and Lava Glide Pathway, if that's where your budget lies. Training Center, which is the Battle Bond land. And a Fiery Islet, and this is where you're getting the real budget because it deals the damage too, but it's the Horizon Canopy style land. If you want to go even further in the budget, you can do actually, I don't know how budget the red-blue land is now, because that's they're getting expensive, the red-blue duels. But you can do a Frostboil Snarl if you need. Some of the utility stuff that isn't mana fixing, you can go into something like a Nivix, Airy to the Firemind. Not a bad option for this deck. Minamo, School at Water's Edge. Castle Embereth. If you want to buff your creatures, Castle Embereth will do that. Cavern of Souls is a great addition to this deck. It's a tribal deck, and you can name pirates, and then they can't be countered. Hall of Oracles is a good one to add in here, and if you want to continue some land destruction because you're in red, you can do a Strip Mine. Unclaimed Territory is a good one to add because, again, you can name pirates, and then it'll tap to add a color, any color you want to cast a pirate, so that's always good. And a War Room helps you to draw cards. So those are some of the suggestions for lands that I would put in here. If you don't know what any of these cards, I'm going to put a couple of these up here for you to see. But if you need to know specifically what each one does, there are a couple ways. You can go to the Gather. I believe that's just a generic internet site that, it has all the cards and what they are and what they do. I myself, because I have an Android, go to MTG Familiar and just type in the card, or at least start typing it, and most of the time it'll autofill it for you. However you like to do it. But again, if you need to see what they are, that's how you're going to have to do it. As far as ramp goes, I did mention earlier, red and blue don't have a lot of options for ramp. Here's how you can do it, not on a budget. Okay, so obviously this is my holy trinity of non-budget ramp for colors that don't ramp. So you got Jeweled Lotus, Mox Diamond, and Mana Crypt. I mean, you can even throw in a Mana Vault just to have extra colors. I did not throw a Soul Ring in here, or an Arcane Signet, or a Thought Vessel. You can throw them in here as well. And the reason I didn't is because I don't have a lot of Soul Rings. I don't have any Arcane Signets. I'm starting to get more to put into my own decks. And then Thought Vessels, I don't have enough of. I know that people don't really like Thought Vessel just because, I don't know why, actually. It's a 2-cast mana rock that adds a colorless, and it makes it so that your hand size doesn't matter. It's just utility, so I would add that to every deck if I could. If you want to go a little cheaper on some of the mana rocks, still didn't fit into the budget here, and I don't have a lot of them, but you can do Mind Stones, or a Mind Stone, sorry, it's Commander. Felwar Stone, and here's something I like. You can do a Fractured Power Stone. It's kind of weird to throw one in there because you don't really have a planar die, but it still is a 2-cast mana rock. But the interesting one is the new one that just came out recently, Liquid Metal Torque. Here's a little interaction with little Liquid Metal Torque. So it's a 2-cast mana rock that taps to add a colorless, but then it can make something an artifact. Red's strong suit is to kill artifacts. You can make somebody else's things, so a commander or what have you, an artifact, and then use your artifact destruction that red utilizes very well to destroy something of theirs. It's a nice little interaction that I've come up with. You can do Prismatic Lens, another 2-cast mana rock, and then the one that a lot of people like to use is like the Talisman. So Talisman of Creativity is the blue-red Talisman. It's 2-cast. You can tap it to add a colorless, and then you can pay a life and tap it to add a red or a blue. Okay, so that's the way that I would go with on the ramp for upgrades. Depending on your budget, you can go in. I don't have a budget for a Jeweled Lotus. I just happen to own the Mox Diamond already, so some of my decks have them. But if I didn't own them from way back in the day, I wouldn't be playing with them. And I opened a couple Mana Crypts recently, but I'm not buying these. I don't have the option to trade a lot, so I can't just go find these cards. So these are just a couple of ways you can do it. I've given you some budgetary options and some non-budget options. Creatures. So you're just, to upgrade this section, you're just looking for the upgrades to the pirates that already exist in the deck. Okay, there are a couple, not many. There are a couple of non-pirates that you can add too, but we'll go over a couple of them. So I'll start by telling you Captain Lannery Storm can be added, and Captain Ridley Vance can be added, and then those are additions you can make to the deck that would help, remove a couple of the other lower pirates that just barely do anything, and add them. You can do a Daring Saboteur as well, or a Direfleet Daredevil, and obviously it came from a Commander Precon, now it's like a $70 card, but Dockside Extortionist, I mean, you're already playing the Treasure Token theme, why not capitalize on it with a Dockside Extortionist? Glinthorn Buccaneer is actually one of the better ones that I would add to this deck as well. It's got a cool little thing you can do when you're discarding cards. That's one of the reasons why all those looting cards are in here, so that if you upgrade it, you go get a Glinthorn Buccaneer, and that will be the catalyst for making this deck really shine, is with the looting cards and Glinthorn Buccaneer. Port Razor is a good one, and then recently printed, and recently the highest, I believe it's the highest monetary card in Modern Horizons 2, Ragavan. Obviously Ragavan goes in here because it's a pirate. I said something earlier about the Rishadan guys, that when they come into play, your opponent has to pay X amount, whatever's on the card, and they have to sacrifice a permanent. So that would be Rishadan Brigand and Rishadan Cut Purse. Those are the ones that I couldn't remember off the top of my head what they were called. You can also add a Spectral Sailor. As far as pirate goes, it has evasion. It helps you draw cards. I didn't have any. It's only an uncommon, but I don't even have any, and I love the card. So there are many more that you can use. If you want to look at what pirates aren't in here, there are a bunch more. You can go ahead and look. I mentioned earlier the MTG Familiar or the Gatherer. Go ahead and look on them, and you can see which ones fit your style or which ones you think would be better if you own them. Okay? All right. So that's the creatures. Spells. So with spells, we have card draw that you want to add in here. I said that blue is the best at it. There are other things. There are a lot of cards you can add in here. I'll mention off the bat Blue Sun Zenith because it shuffles in and you can draw X cards. With all those treasure tokens, you should have excess mana available, and it's an instant, so it's a great card to add to a deck like this. There are also the cantrip ones, you know, the one to cast cards that let you draw a card. And again, I'm going to tell you, go to the Gather and see, type in, or in on the MTG Familiar, and go and type in, you know, put in, make it a blue card and draw a card, and then you can take a look at cards that you'd like to do. I like the looting cards in here, especially if you get a Glenhorn Buccaneer. Defensively, you have stuff like Cyclonic Rift. Again, blue doesn't destroy things, and red only destroys land and artifacts. So your best defense here is something like a Cyclonic Rift. I didn't add it. It's an expensive card for an uncommon, but Vandal Blast. It goes great with Liquid Metal Torque if you're making things your opponents control artifacts. Vandal Blast, you know, if it's overloaded, destroys all artifacts in your opponent's control. So keep that in mind. It's expensive monetarily. I know that they just reprinted it in, I believe it was Modern Horizons 2 again, or was it Time Spiral Remastered? I can't remember which one it was. Still expensive, and it doesn't fit into a $40 budget deck. You can upgrade that yourself. And then obviously Counter Magic. Counter Magic is great for any blue deck. So you've got things like Counterspell, Mana Drain, Force of Negation, Force of Will. Again, doesn't fit the budget for what I have, but if you get this deck and you upgrade it, you can do that. And I have to mention Brass's Bounty. Brass's Bounty definitely helps you with your treasure token theme. So that's another thing you can add in there as well. Enchantments. This is where it gets a little fun. So obviously blue enchantments have really good card draw stuff. So like Rhystic Study, which everybody hates, you know, do you pay the one? Mystic Remora, again, more card draw. And then there are a couple of things out there like Coastal Piracy. There's another newer card that does something like Coastal Piracy where when your opponent or when your creatures damage your opponents with combat damage, you get to draw a card. So that's a way to draw cards with your enchantments. You've got the new Sorcerer class. That's a great addition to this deck. I would definitely add that if I had any. I actually haven't opened a whole lot of. Actually, I didn't open any. I don't have any Adventures of Forgotten Realms yet, so I don't even have anything yet for this. But I would add that. Storm the Vault. So basically, Storm the Vault helps you with treasure tokens. It'll flip and turn into a Tolarian Academy, but it's a legal one in Commander. As Foretold is a great addition. So every turn you put a counter on it, and then for each turn, and I have to mention this, each turn, not just yours, you get to cast a spell for free. Keep that in mind in a deck like this where you can flip over your opponent's cards. You can cast a spell for free equal to or less than the amount of counters on As Foretold. Great addition to this deck. It's probably a superstar in this deck because when you're, you know, you have a guy in here, the Rigger, that taps to do a damage to all of your opponents. They flip over a card with Breeches out. They exile that top card, and then you can cast stuff that they have. With As Foretold, you don't even have to pay for it. Remember, it's only one spell, but you don't have to pay for it. So great addition to a deck like this. You have Leyline of Anticipation. Now it gets really fun. Everything now is a instant, or it has flash. I know, it counts as an instant. So now that really shows the As Foretold really goes into effect. Your Breeches ability goes into effect. Malcolm creating treasure tokens means that when you don't have the As Foretold trigger left, you can still cast things. Everything's an instant, so now it doesn't really matter what what turn it is or anything. Just remember you can't play lands as instants though. You don't play them, or you can't cast them, you can only play them. And inherently, they can only be played on your turn. Unless you have something in green that says you otherwise, which there are, but you're not in green. Mind's Dilation is a great addition to a deck like this, along with, and this is where the fun begins. I just mentioned As Foretold and Leyline of Anticipation. The third part to that is Omniscience, where now you can cast everything for free. So now you have Leyline of Anticipation out, you have Omniscience out, you have Breeches out. So now you're exiling people's top cards, you're casting stuff for free, you're doing this, you're doing that. Great sets for combo, great set of combos in there, and great way to control the board. And then Stolen Strategy. I believe that, off the top of my head, I know that I wrote that down because I remember that's something where if you can I think it's at the beginning of your upkeep, or if you deal damage, I can't remember which one it is. You get to exile. It's basically a Breeches. You exile the top card of the library, and then you get to play it. So, all great stuff to add to this deck. It would be so much fun to add something like that. So, and of course, again, I mentioned this after every section. Go to the MTG Familiar or the Gatherer and look up cards that might fit the theme here. You might find something that I'm missing, or I just forgot to mention. Artifacts, so utility artifacts section. Stuff like Academy Manufacturer, so it's one of those weird new ones where whenever you create a treasure token, you can create a treasure token, a food token, and what's the other token? Clue. A clue token. So you can draw a card, you can add mana or mana pool, and you can gain life. It's a good addition to this deck, especially with all the tokens you're creating. Gold Vein Pick, maybe it's a possibility, or a Prying Blade, only because it fits the pirate theme. And it creates treasure tokens. Those are one of those ones where I didn't even put it into the budget version, just because I wasn't sure of the interaction, and I thought there were better ways to go about doing it. Treasure Map. Let's just be honest, it fits the theme of pirate treasure map. Let's see, Biden of Thassa. So it's an artifact and an enchantment, and it lets you draw cards whenever you deal damage. Same thing with Coastal Piracy. What else we got here? Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots help protect your commanders, and I'm going to say, for this deck, if you have the room, do multiples, because you want to protect both commanders. Vanquisher's Banner, because it makes your creatures get +1/+1, and they're a type. I want to go over that real fast. It's a type. So with types, some artifacts have types that get +1/+1. Some have color. So Vanquisher's Banner covers that because it says you choose a creature type. Let's see, what else we got? Herald's Horn. Herald's Horn's not a bad one, because it's creature type. You can cycle through your deck and find more pirates, so that's actually not a bad one. That's a really good one. Icon of Ancestry, same thing, and I was mentioning that earlier. You can choose a creature type, pirates obviously, and it gives them a bonus. This one only gives them +1/+0, but every time it just helps buff. And then you can add a mana of the color of your choice. Most likely you're going to choose, on this one, I think red. Maskwood Nexus, so you can make everything a pirate. It's only necessary to do that if you add things that are not pirates in here. That's one of those secondary things to think of later. So if you have other stuff in here that does things but they are not pirates, that's where that would come in. Inspiring Sanctuary is a great addition to this deck. I had that one starred for a reason. I'll show you that one up here, and you can read that for yourself. Sword of the Animist helps you go get lands and put them into play. That helps thin your deck. Again, red-blue doesn't have a lot of ramp, so that would help it. And Journeyer's Kite. I know that sounds weird to say Journeyer's Kite. I say it a lot just because in my head, when the color doesn't have the ability to go get lands for itself, you have to figure out a way to do it. Journeyer's Kite's one of those ways. And then the last section, Planeswalkers. Planeswalkers were kind of an iffy one for me, but there are a couple. So, Kasmina, Enigmatic Mentor, the uncommon one from not Dominaria. What the hell is this one from? Anyway, it doesn't really matter. I'll have it up here. She helps protect your creatures with the new ability of Ward is kind of what she has. It makes it so that people have to spend 2 more mana to cast something that targets your creatures. Narset, Parter of Veils is, helps make it so that your opponents can't draw cards. Sahili the Gifted is good for artifact decks, so you can use her as well. And then the same thing with the 2 Tezzerets that deal stuff with artifacts. So you've got Tezzeret the Seeker and Tezzeret Artifice Master, just because they deal well with artifacts. One of them lets you draw cards. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's the Artifice Master. I think it lets you draw 2 cards if you control, I think, 3 or more artifacts as its loyalty ability that you take away, not add. So the minus ability. So all good options that you can add in there. So those are just a few. And again, I mention all the time, you can go into the Gatherer or to MTG Familiar and put in stuff, parameters that you want to fit the deck with. You can go heavy on one part of the theme, like the treasure theme, or you can go heavy on the pirate theme, and then you can mix and match the way you want. So again, just some options. So that's my Breeches and Malcolm budget deck. I see that I've really gone over on time here, so I want to apologize. It's a really long video, but this is one of those decks I really liked. I might actually put a version of this together myself, just because I don't have a blue-red for my... I'm trying to do the color challenge where I get a commander deck of each color combination in the game, and I do not have a blue-red one, and this may be it. I'm not sure yet. Either way, so this is the budget version. This one is for sale. It is $40 plus shipping. If you are interested in a deck like this, or you may know somebody interested in a deck like this, or if somebody you know is trying to build, or you yourself are trying to build a deck like this, you know, you can go ahead and watch the video over and over if you'd like. That would really help my analytics. Or you can share this out to somebody who may be looking to build this deck or wants this deck. So, you know, hopefully it helps somebody do it. To purchase this deck, you can go to the Facebook page. It's Bluebears Games. What is it? Facebook.com/BluebearGames.online. I don't know why the .online is there. You can just Google it if you really need to. Just type in Bluebears Games and I'll come up in a bunch of different ways. You can email me, bluebearsgames@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment below and just tell me how to contact you if you want to do it that way, and then I will contact you. Either way, let's get it done. So, do one of those things if you want to purchase it. Share it out to somebody who may want to build it or wants to purchase it, and that would really help me out. Please subscribe to the channel. Doesn't cost you anything to do so. Helps me out a lot. Doesn't, you know, again, doesn't cost anything. Like the video, same thing. Doesn't cost anything. Helps out my analytics, and I'm trying to help everybody out as best as I can. And share the video out. I'll repeat that over and over, because the more people who share this out for me, the better my analytics go, the more people can see my stuff, and the better off I'll be as far as being able to help people. So that's my time for the week. I went over. I apologize. Hopefully, you know, it wasn't too long. You can skip the parts that you don't need to. Whatever. I will see you guys next week, and hopefully it'll be a much shorter video. Have a good one.